Hi there, my name is Peter Taylor. I'm known as the lazy project manager because I spend a lot of my time talking about business transformation, business change and projects in the workplace. However, as a result of the success I've had in the area of writing books and working with a number of organizations, I have been able to travel the world, 25 countries, and delivered over 350 presentations in total. And this has given me some insight into kind of what makes a good presentation and what makes perhaps not so good presentation. I'm not suggesting all of my presentations have been fantastic, but you learn over the years. You learn by practice, you learn by experience, and you learn by watching a lot of other speakers. And so today I want to use some of the material I developed in my training courses, my presentational skills training program, and some of the ideas I have in my book, The Presentation on Presentations. And I want to share this with you because I know in the world of presentations inside the business place that actually sometimes they're not as good as they should be, really. You work for and work with busy executives, and sometimes much as they'd like to give a great presentation, sometimes it just doesn't turn out that way. So this session is really to give you some ideas of how you can help your busy executives deliver slightly better, slightly improved presentations that are more successful as a result of that, because people engage, people connect, people enjoy them, people listen, people learn. If it's not a good presentation, people do none of those sort of things. So I want to give you a few ideas of how you can help your executives do better presentations. I want to offer some basic tips and techniques for evaluating presentations and improving them. And of course, you yourself may well do some presentations yourself, in which case this is going to be useful to you as well. So welcome to this session, the presentation skills for busy executives. And what we're trying to do here is we're trying to avoid death by PowerPoint. We've all experienced that. We all are in many ways experts in presentations because we've all experienced really bad ones and we've experienced good ones, and we know what good should look like. It's just a shame that sometimes, or in fact sometimes more often than not actually, the business presentations are a little bit rushed, a little bit unprepared, a little bit unprofessional, and a little bit weak in many areas. So welcome to this session, and let's talk about the presentation skills for business executives. So what you can see here is what's known as the Bruskin report. It's from 1971. It was an analysis of fears from the American public at that point. So it was conducted by the US marketing research firm R.H. Bruskin Associates, and it was done for the American Travel Research Association. And the good folks at Travel Research, they wanted to help dealing with what they thought was a big marketing problem for the travel industry at that time, the Americans' fear of flying. Bruskin was delighted to be able to help them out with their survey, which remarkably showed ordinary Americans were much more afraid of many things, heights, insects, financial problems, deep water, sickness, than they were of flying. But the whole report has been completely discredited now. It was totally biased. And of course, at that point, the majority of Americans didn't fly. So then why would they have a fear of doing something they've never experienced? So this is, a historical piece of research that is actually completely irrelevant these days, except for the fact that the number one thing that was identified as the fear was public speaking, and that probably hasn't changed. Many people have this fear of standing up in front of an audience, in front of their peers, in front of their colleagues, and speaking, having the confidence to speak. And in fact, if you look at the Bruskin report, people were less afraid of dying alone in the dark than they were of public speaking, which is incredible. So there is this inherent fear of standing up in front of the public or a group of people and speaking, and it's something that even wherever you are in an organization, but even at the level of busy senior executives, successful executives, there is still this fear, and you recognize this. I'm sure you have seen your executives stand up there and nervously and ah and present and fidget and try and get out of presentations, etc. And it's really this whole session I'm talking about today is really how can you help them overcome that. In fact, the other thing about the Bruskin report is, I think, which was fundamentally wrong with it, another reason why it should be discredited was the fact that what it didn't include as a fear was, and wait for it, clowns. Yep, sorry about that. Clowns are the most scary thing on the planet, and therefore that is actually far more scary than actually public speaking. Starting point. The audience. You're doing a presentation. You're not doing a presentation in an empty room. You're doing it to an audience. So you need to think about the audience. And this is the first mistake that many people make. They assume the audience is just the same. Every session, whatever, the audience is the same. And that's really not true. I think you need to think about the makeup of your audience. Now, if you consider this, I think you could possibly look at the audience in 4 categories. And the categories go along like this. There will be fans. There will be people who support you. There might be your, if your executive is doing a presentation, it might be their management team, it might be their colleagues, their peers. These are the fans. These are the people who want whatever it is they're talking about to come across well, to be accepted, to be liked, etc. And so the fans will always be fans. I mean, whether you do a great presentation or a mediocre presentation, they are going to be your fans, your supporters. Second group are the neutrals, and this typically makes up a lot of the audience. They are there and they have neither positive or negative feelings about it at this point in time. They are actually open to listening to you, but you have to convince them, you have to persuade them, you have to be reasonably positive in what you're doing, and you have to be competent in what you're doing. And at that point they will begin to move across to, if not fans, they will certainly be necessarily supporters at this point in time. Now, on the other side of the equation, if you like, are those who are, they kind of let me entertain, they entertain me. You've got to entertain me, you've got to engage me, you've got to show me your value, your worth. At this point, I'm kind of negative, but you have a chance. I'm not negative, and I will never change. I'm just, I want to listen, and I want to be engaged. I want to be intrigued, or I want to enjoy what I'm hearing. I want to enjoy the way I'm hearing it and the way you're performing. And if that happens, I will move across into the kind of neutral and then on into the fan kind of area of audience designation. Now, if this is the case, you could lose these people very quickly. Typically in a presentation, there's a thing called a 10-minute window, which means after 10 minutes after you start talking, you will start losing some of your audience because they are drifting off, they're not paying attention, you haven't engaged them enough, you haven't connected enough, they're not interested in what you're saying, or you're not saying it very well. If that is the case, then you lost these people, and that's a shame because you have lost part of your audience. So you need to think about that carefully. And finally, there's a group which, they are the kind of left the building. These are the people who turn up in a room because they have to be there, not because they want to be there. Protocol or procedure or process or whatever means they have to be there, and they probably got a dozen other things that they could say were more important that they should be doing, and they're there in a very grudging state. And these people, I think, are almost impossible to win over during a presentation. They may be convinced to be less negative after the event if they hear other people talking positive about it. This was a good session, or enjoyed that was a great point. If they hear other people saying those sort of things, they may quietly come around and start going, okay, yeah, I suppose it was all right. But actually during the presentation, my experience is not so much. Now, when I do conferences and business meetings, there's a mixture of people. I mean, conferences are typically an audience of fans and neutrals, perhaps. There are very few people who have left the building because of the conference. They don't have to sit in the room if they don't want to. They don't have to be there. So that's a certain makeup of an audience. If I'm doing an in-house business event, then the audience could well be a mixture of all 4. There may well be people who go, well, I have to be here because there's a project management event and I have to attend it, or there's a transformational business educational session and I have to attend it. In that case, I have to try and understand the audience. I won't understand the individuals because I've never met these people before, but I can at least talk to the people who are sponsoring the event and get some understanding from them of the kind of characters I'm like to have in the audience. And I customize my presentation accordingly. So my tip here is for your business executives is they need to do the same thing. Don't just think the fact they're turning up for the monthly town hall and everybody in the audience is sitting there waiting for their pearls of wisdom and so excited to be sitting in a room, possibly on a comfortable or sometimes on an uncomfortable chair. Perhaps they have real pressures from client activity or something they should be getting on with, and they are there by sufferance. And so you need to think about this, and you need to consider the audience and make sure that you tailor, you'll customize your presentation to engage them and bring them along with you. So don't just take your audience at face value. Don't believe that the audience is made up of like-minded people or fans particularly, because that isn't going to be the case. Purpose. Why is anybody doing a presentation? Why does anybody want to stand up there and do a presentation? We talked about the fact that most people are very nervous about that experience. So why are you doing it? And I think there are three typical categories. I think the purposes can be that you are trying to prove something, you're trying to convince something about a group of people about something, and you're trying to educate people. Now this presentation is an educational one. I'm trying to share some of my experiences, some things that I've learnt through personal experience or through learning from other people through this kind of webinar, this kind of session, this presentation, and therefore it's educational. If you're trying to convince people, it's an argument. This is kind of like you're on a journey that you maybe you want to lobby for a new project or a new initiative inside an organisation. Maybe you're talking about the kind of new structure for the coming year. Those sort of things are where you're trying to convince people about something. And finally, there's kind of the proof. This may well be to do with, perhaps there is a sales situation or a procurement situation, and whoever's coming in from a supplier will typically be there to try and prove to you that their solution is the right one, or you're trying to prove to your prospects that your solution or whatever it is you're offering as a business is the right thing for them. And I think this requires sort of subtle differences as far as the content's concerned and the approach that you take. So you need to consider this. There is a fourth category, of course, and that one tends to be far more personal. And that's an occasion. That's a time when, for example, you may well have to do some sort of speech. A typical example of that would be at a wedding. You have to make some sort of speech because that's your father of the bride or whatever it may be, best man, that kind of thing. In which case that can be a nerve-wracking experience for many people. But it's another style of presentation, and each of them require a different structure, a different format, a different flavour, I think, to kind of get it right. And if you think about what you're trying to do, then this moves us naturally across to the content. The content is what you are trying to provide to people. And the tips I would have here are simple, really. Don't try and cram every single piece of information into the presentation, because that way it's almost guaranteed to be dry, dull, and boring. I was taught in the early days that when you do a presentation, it kind of should be 80% entertainment, 20% information. You may play around with those kind of figures, but the reality is if you don't consider the audience's engagement, and it's all about pushing data, information, numbers, whatever, it doesn't engage people particularly well. So I think you need to think very much about your content to ensure that you are approaching this the right way. Which kind of brings us logically onto time. The time is the enemy of everything, and particularly presentations. And here's a simple test, isn't it? How many of you have ever complained about a presentation finishing early? Really, we haven't, have we? But that just doesn't happen. I mean, it happened. I saw it once. I was at a conference. One of the keynotes who was following myself was supposed to be speaking for 60 minutes, and after 20 minutes they stopped talking and said questions, which kind of worried everybody, including the master of ceremonies, the host, who was outside having a cup of coffee at that point and was completely unprepared to kind of pick it up and try and manage the situation. So, but that's an extreme. In most cases, if not 99.9% of cases, nobody has ever complained about a presentation finishing early. Yet all of us have quietly raged about a presentation that has finished late. When you get to 60 minutes and they're on 0.5 of 10 points and they show no signs of considering stopping or closing down. Now the weakness often is, particularly with formalised events, that there should really be someone there to control time, to give you warnings of like 10 minutes to go, 5 minutes to go, etc. In a workplace environment, this doesn't necessarily happen. If a senior executive is standing up there talking, it's a brave person that starts waving a sign around that says 5 minutes to go or stop talking now, get off. The reality is, when it comes to time, the way you think about it is this. If I do a presentation for 60 minutes and I do a bad presentation, I've wasted 60 minutes of my time. I've wasted a bit more because I would have prepared for that presentation. Perhaps I should have prepared a bit more if it was a bad one, but I've wasted some of my time. That is absolutely not how you should think about this. You should think about it by going, right, how many people in the audience? Well, let's say there's 100 people in the audience. 100 people, 60 minutes each. That's 100 hours of their time I've wasted by doing a bad presentation. So what you can see here is a picture of Abraham Lincoln, the US president, and it is an image from the Gettysburg Address, which is one of the most famous speeches in history. The Gettysburg Address was a speech, as I said, delivered by US President Abraham Lincoln, and it was at the dedication of the National Cemetery at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, the site of one of the most bloody and decisive battles of the American Civil War. And what's really interesting about this event is it was actually nothing to do with Abraham Lincoln. It was actually led, organised by a gentleman called Edward Everett. And Edward Everett decided the best thing he could possibly do was to sit on a horse and deliver a 2-hour oration. A presentation, if you like, a speech that lasted for 2 hours. It's 13,607 words long. Now, I've written books that are actually shorter than that. He delivered this. And I suspect that none of you listening will have ever heard of Edward Everett. Obviously, because of his position as president, Abraham Lincoln was invited to attend the event and was asked to say a few words. And that's exactly what Abraham Lincoln did. He delivered a speech that is roughly, it depends which version you record, history is a little bit variable here, somewhere between 271 and 273 words. But Edward Everett, 13,607 words, and Abraham Lincoln 271 words, so we say. And what's famous, what's remembered? Absolutely. It is the Gettysburg Address from Abraham Lincoln. You may well know it. 7 years ago our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. That is one of the great speeches of all time. And the lesson behind this is, and the lesson you need to share with your executives is, and you probably can use this as a great example, less is more. Less is absolutely more. You do not have to cram stuff in to educate, engage, or deliver a good speech. You need to think about minimizing the content. Less is absolutely more, as Abraham Lincoln has clearly demonstrated here with one of the great speeches of history. One of the things you've just got to watch out for is these wonderful, brilliant graphics. I mean, people get excited about them. They're very dynamic and engaging to begin with. But the problem is, as you can see here, if you leave this up on the screen, nobody is paying attention to anything that anybody is saying at the front of the room. They're just looking at these beautiful images, you know. Oh, they're so beautiful, I can't take my eyes off them. Use them sparingly, use them at the start for impact if you like, but don't leave them running. That's my first piece of advice. When it comes to graph, and here is a graph, and the graph may well have some results on it, and there may be an area that should be noted, an important bit here. There's an outlier, which can be quite confusing, of course. There's some mountains with snow, and a smiley face just to make it a friendly graph. And we're going to put the measurement in quantity in Googleplexes and time in fortnights, just to confuse the Americans. And there you have a graph. Now, if you remember back to when I showed you the Bruskin report, there were, I think, something like 40 data points in the Bruskin report, something like that. You had no need to see all those. I just pulled out 4 points that supported the conversation or the argument or the discussion that we were having at that point. I was proving a point not by putting up the entire graph, but by putting up the relevant parts of the graph. Again, you know, consider this, focus in on the detail. And finally, in this area, something like this. I mean, how many times have you heard someone say, I know you can't see that at the back, but, well, in that case, don't put it on the screen. You know, drill in. What's the important piece of data here? What is the point you're trying to make? Focus in on that. Well, you could have this as a backdrop if you want, but, you know, have a massive, great big number that appears in the middle of this image and says, this is the figure I need you to focus on. It was this one here. All right, let's talk about it. So don't put something up that nobody can read. Also, you need to think about risks. And now, in your role, you know, supporting these busy executives, you probably have to think about the risks for them. They're doing a presentation, so, you know, have you validated the slides all work? Do they build appropriately? Do they flow properly? Do they look, you know, are they the same format? You know, are they the same style? You know, there is a pleasing experience about the structure of slides. And if they keep jarring from one format to another, that's never really good at all. And then, is the laptop working? Does the projector work? Is the screen visible? Controlling the lights in the room, sound, if there's sound, etc. Does the videos play if they're using video? Do they need internet connection? Is that performing well? All of these sort of things are potential risks to delivering a bad presentation, which has nothing to do with the presenter as such, but it's all part of the experience around that presentation. So, there's a great importance in thinking about what could go wrong, and if it goes wrong, what are we going to do about it? And as far as good presentations are concerned, then the easiest thing you can think of, and this might be a great technique if you're sitting down with one of your executives and they're preparing for a presentation, is just to say to them, what are your top 3 hates regarding presentations? And they might say things like, well, when someone reads their slides, or when the time overruns, or something like that. And if whatever they say, you go, well, okay, let's make sure this doesn't happen in this presentation, and I will take a close look at that. And if it's about timing, what can we do about managing the timing? And if it's about too much detail on the slides, let me tidy them up, let me clean them up for you. That kind of thing is very powerful, because if you think about what you hate, then you can think conversely about what you love, and therefore that leads you naturally into what is a good presentation. I'm going to give you 3 rules, and I'm going to ask you to break those rules. But the first thing I would ask you to do is look at what's on the screen now. What's up there is an image. And this is a powerful thing, imagery. If you think about the great presentations from Steve Jobs in the past, Jeff Bezos right now, many other sort of leading C-level executives when they're doing business presentations or customer presentations, they use a minimal amount of words and they use a maximum amount of visual imagery. It's called visual superiority or picture superiority. And this is absolutely true. If you see something that is a powerful image, it stays with you much longer than a bullet point on a slide, or bullet points on a slide. So, what I hope you remember from seeing this is that I am asking you to break the rules, and that in turn will allow you to remember what those rules are and allow you to break them. But let's back to those 3 rules. The first rule is it's known as the 6-6-1 rule. And what it means is that on any slide there is only one thought, there's only one subject, only one topic, one idea. There are only 6 bullet points on that slide, and every bullet point can have no more than 6 words. That's the 6-6-1 rule. And if your slides are, or your executive slides are, full of words and too many bullet points, and lots of ideas bouncing on one page or one slide, then this is a great rule to try and apply as a starting point. But if you've reached that point, then I would utterly encourage you to, next time around, reduce it to 3 bullet points with 3 words and one idea, and then cut it down again, and keep trimming it down until ideally you have no bullet points, no words at all. You have an image, simple image. So my first ask of you is to break the 6-6-1 rule. The second rule is to tell them. This is where you tell people what you're going to talk about at the start of a presentation. You go through telling them the detail of the presentation. At the end, you summarize by telling them exactly what you just told them just a few minutes ago. It's a format that's relevant to training material, I think, but I don't think it's relevant to a presentation. It's very repetitive, very laborious, and a little bit condescending. People can follow, if you make a good presentation, people can follow what you say, and they can retain that information, and you can follow it up later on, as I said, with handouts or additional material or a follow-up session or whatever. So that's the second rule I think I require you to really think about. And the final rule is, how do you wrap up a presentation? Thanking people at the end and that's it. Well, that's fine, and that's great to be polite, and it's great to always appreciate your audience, but there should be a call to action. In every case, there should be some call to action, and not just leave a presentation dead. There should be something. What happens next? What do I want you to do? What am I asking you to do? What do I asking you to think about doing? What should you consider after this presentation? At this one, when I finish it, I will certainly thank you as an audience, but I would encourage you at that point to go and try at least one of the ideas I've talked about. There's the call to action. And that brings us to a close for this short presentation about presenting skills for busy executives. I hope it's been of some use to you. If you want to check out or guide your executives in one final way, then check out TED Talks. There's some brilliant TED Talks out there. They're short, they're insightful, they're entertaining, they're engaging. Just go and search for the top 10 TED Talks or something like that. Maybe share with your executives. TED Talk of the Week or something like that. And also you can always get help. This is the sort of thing I get involved in, which is working with organisations to coach and develop their executives or people who do regular presentations. But for now, thank you very much. It's been my pleasure to talk to you today, and I hope you are successful in your future presentations, your executives are successful in their future presentations, and everybody has a much more enjoyable time. Thank you.